We're so excited to have Dr. West here. We're so excited that he's going to be with us in the evening and telling us where to go from here on Monday. But in the meanwhile, we do have Spectrum News. I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Mike Nyman, who is a professor, media professor at Buff State, and a journalist, author, commentator, who's been a special advisor to the Western New York Peace Center. We have Deidre ML, our office manager and coordinator. And we have board members, including Chris St. Ville is actually on camera, and we have a number of other Kelly, Marie, Kellyanne, Marty McGee, other people. You can meet them later, but for now, Thomas O'Neill White is here as a journalist. We have Spectrum News as a journalist, and we also have Mark Summer coming in. And so we want to welcome everyone, and I want to ask who has a question for our beloved brother, Dr. Cornel West.
Well, before we even get started, I just want to point out Thomas O'Neill White is with WBFO,
Yes.
WBFO, public NPR radio station affiliate in Buffalo, and also the largest radio newsroom in the region. And award-winning. So not just the journalist,
Former student of yours.
Thank you for that, Dr. Nyman. I appreciate that.
No problem. I appreciate you. I got to thank Dr. West personally. I just came out of a faculty, an hour-and-a-half faculty meeting on Zoom. Just click. So if I came in looking a little bit like a zombie, man, thanks for like the face-to-face resuscitation. I feel alive again.
No, you looking well, brother. You look. If we all emerge from faculty meetings the way you looking, we'd all be in better shape. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Okay, let's get this bad boy started.
Okay, so I would just say, who has a first question for Dr. West? Mike, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of an echo here, so does that sound better? Can you hear me clear? I'm getting an echo. Do you hear me?
Edit 4 doesn't rename. If edit 4 you don't read, we need to know who you are. That's the last mention I'll make of that. So go ahead, Dr.
Okay.
Nyman.
Yeah, good. No, Dr. No. Yeah. So here's a question about the so-called Latinx vote, and really, we're all uncomfortable with that term. It's a myth because it's a political construct, and we have a lot of people talking demographics and about how demographics are changing and how we have a lot to look forward to as we get more Latinx people registered to vote in the United States. But race and identity is a political construct, and I think what nobody's really talking about is that as we get more Latinx folks in the country, many of them, group by group, subsets, transform into white people. So as far as having a more diversified country, and in the history of fascism, you always kind of open up to a big tent to begin with, and then you start paring everybody back out of it again. But right now, I'm wondering, Dr. West, if you can, address this topic and, all that talk about Latinx voters in Florida and, shifting and not behaving the way Democrats would like them to behave. Just this whole idea that, Latinx folks, many are, becoming white folks, at least for political purposes. So if you can comment on that.
Oh, sure. No, well, thank you so much, Brother Mike. I want to salute the work that you do there in the university, and I want to just begin by highlighting my dear sister Vicky, her visionary leadership. She's been such a long distance runner, and we applaud that. It's a blessing to meet Sister Deidre and the work that she does. At the first time I've just met her, but I can see her grace and her dignity. And Brother Chris, who I don't know if he's not on here now, but I want to acknowledge him and all of his great spirit. But no, I think the first thing though, Brother Michael, that what we don't want to do, we don't want to just jump into this kind of mainstream nitpicking of these various groups that you get within the neoliberal framework. I think we have to recognize the degree to which the neoliberal Democratic Party as a whole is in deep crisis, and they're just looking for a certain kind of distraction rather than not coming to terms with the rot that sits at the center of so much of their project. And by rot, what I mean is the link, the tie, the close affiliations to Wall Street. You know, they spent $1.1 billion looking for the Biden Republican, and they got one candidate. That's crisis. You probably heard about the meeting they had yesterday on the phone. They end up hollering at each other. So they're just looking for different scapegoats rather than looking at themselves. And so they end up with, you know, these Cubans in Florida. Everybody know you got an upper middle class Cuban population that left the island that will be deeply conservative until that generation dies out. Now that younger generation is changing. There's no doubt about that. But if the Cubans had gone to Idaho, nobody'd be talking about them because Florida itself is a swing state, and therefore their particular conservatism does indeed play a very important role. So it warrants some kind of attention, but not really, I don't think, our major attention. Right now, we've got a crisis of legitimacy of the system as a whole. To live in a country where Donald Trump can be a serious candidate, let alone a candidate after 4 years, and still get a near majority of the vote, that's a sign of a sickness of a society, a deep spiritual decay, a deep moral fortitude. We're going to be talking about this on Monday. So for me, that's really the starting point. You know what I mean? Now it's true, you know, you look at different groups. He got a higher percentage of Black men. Well, Black men have problems of toxic masculinity. Black men have problems of identifying with winners. We've seen that with Kanye West and others, right? Vast majority of white brothers voted for him again. Majority of white sisters voted for him again. That's a sign of a certain kind of decay. That's a certain kind of rot. And by decay and rot, these are not moralistic categories. These are categories having to do with the spirit of a people when your system does not provide strong alternatives to the present. And the choice between catastrophe and disaster is always going to be a very, very sad affair. And most of us fought for the disaster. We fought for Biden, but we know Biden's still tied to militarism. We know he's still tied to Wall Street. We know he's not going to be able to deliver on the deeper issues. We know he's not fundamentally committed to peace. He's not fundamentally committed to any struggles against militarism. You know what I mean? But we had to stop the march to fascism. And in that sense, we do have something to celebrate. I mean, I think the moment of celebration is that we stopped the move toward fascism, which means that the fundamental rot in which the whole democratic system goes under, and you end up with institutionalized anti-democratic practices. That's what fascism is. Tied to big money, tied to big business, tied to big military. They're always in the background, but we always had to highlight those social forces, you see. And then white supremacy is its face, male supremacy is its face, homophobia, transphobia is its face in the United States, you see. And so in that sense, you know, we've got that little bit to celebrate, but we are in deep, deep trouble. There's no doubt about it. So that's a long answer to your question, brother.
Thank you.
Definitely.
All connected so clearly. Thank you so much, Brother West. So we also have Mark Summer has joined us from the Buffalo News.
Brother
So
Mark.
Thomas, or anyone from Spectrum News, if you can certainly ask a question as well. Unmute yourself. Thomas, do you have a question? Or Mark or Spectrum?
I have a question in the meantime.
Sure.
I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so hi, Dr. West.
How you doing, my brother? Good to
reading
see
your
you.
stuff and watching you for many years, and so it's a real honor and pleasure to be with you. Yesterday, Representative Abigail Spanberger of Virginia lashed out at House Democrats she said, well, here's a quote: "We need to not ever use the word socialist or socialism ever again. We lost good members because of that. If we are classifying Tuesday as a success, we will get fucking torn apart in 2022. I thought that was ironic because Joe Biden is anything but a socialist. The man that you work so hard for, Bernie, he's the real deal, right?
That's right.
So, if anything, this was such a middle of the road campaign in every possible way. And yet she's lashing out at the left for their loss. One might interpret that differently. How would you interpret it?
My brother, I would interpret that as the desperation and misperception of a spokesman for the corporate wing, the establishment wing of the Democratic Party that does not want to examine its own failure. If you're spending $1.1 billion looking for the Biden Republican and you end up with one victory, all that wasted money, and then you lash out at the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, at Bernie and the squad and so forth, then it's just a sign of desperation and misperception. It's a refusal to want to examine oneself. It's a very human thing. We human beings tend to want to avoid and evade painful truths. And establishments specialize in evading painful truths about themselves. And so we're going to get more and more, but it's just the irony to think that you could blame the socialist left and the Democratic Party for the underperformance, the poor performance of the neoliberal wing that was in the driver's seat ever since the end of the Nevada primary, when Bernie and I were out there together thinking we were on the way to the White House. And then boom, the neoliberals came together and they crushed us. And we said, okay, we're going to fight against Trump. Bernie was a very, very good citizen within the party, supported Biden and so forth, and he still gets lashed. The object of the lash, it's a misperception, it's a frustration, it's a desperation. But there's going to be a tremendous battle within the Democratic Party. And some of us are actually looking for a third party, People's Party, and other real possibilities, because it's clear that the Democratic Party is just rudderless. But thank God we were able to come together as a progressive coalition, or what I call an anti-fascist coalition, to make sure that we push Trump out. That's significant, very significant. But this quote, I saw that quote yesterday too. I said, "Ooh, we're gonna get a whole wave of those." Right. Yes, we are. We're gonna get a whole wave of those.
Can I ask another question?
Absolutely. You all ask as many questions as you like.
So as we expected, the Republicans ran a campaign as if Bernie was, the actual candidate when it was Biden, right? Socialist this, socialist that. How do you think Bernie would have done against Trump, pushing real issues like Green New Deal, Medicare for all, et cetera? Do you think Bernie could have taken it all the way?
It's a good question. I mean, I would like to think that he would have, because in order to really beat Trump, not just in the electoral vote in a massive way, but also the electoral college, you have to generate tremendous excitement, enthusiasm. You have to bring in new voters. You have to infuse electoral politics with something fresh and something new. That's Brother Bernie. Mm-hmm. He specialized in doing that. Now, on the other hand, it's also true that, the tremendous apathy in the country. You see, people are just so beat down and tired and fatigued, from pandemic to political paralysis to dysfunctional electoral politics, that you just don't know even whether Bernie would have been able to bring in the new folk long enough. I think so many people are so tired of the system and the lies that go on in both parties. Both parties. I mean, Joe Biden can sit up there and just lie and say, I never used the word super predator in my life. And all you got to do is go to the tape and know that he did over and over again, bragged on it. Quit lying. Bernie would look him in the face and say, you call for cutting Social Security. They got it on the tapes. He said, I never said that. So he's just lying too. Now, he's not as big a liar as Trump, but that's not a compliment. I mean, Trump lied, you know, what, 23,000 times, whereas Biden would lie, 1,500, but he's still lying on crucial issues, you see. Whereas Bernie's really not a liar. He just isn't. He's just not a liar. He's still a politician, but he's a very rare kind of politician. And so he's been unprecedented. He's given us this tremendous gift of opening and critiques of neoliberalism, critiques of militarism, the connections of Black Lives Matter and police power to Wall Street power, to Pentagon power. Boy, that sounds like Martin Luther King Jr. That sounds like Abraham Joshua Heschel. That sounds like Dorothy Day. Oh my God, those kind of truths are seeping in. That sounds like Fannie Lou Hamer. Ooh, you get Fannie Lou Hamer's truths in these politicians, turn them upside down. So that we're going to hear some of those truths from the squad. We're going to hear some of those truths from Jamal Bowman. We're going to hear some of those truths from Cori Bush, the new wave of serious progressives, substantive progressives in the Democratic Party. But I think in the end, a lot of people are going to conclude that the Democratic Party is very much part of the problem. They're just too tied to Wall Street. They're too tied to the Pentagon militarism to really deal with ecological catastrophe, the economic catastrophe, and for me, the spiritual catastrophe. You can never downplay the role of spiritual decay and moral decrepitude in a democracy. And neither of the Biden or Trump came anywhere near capturing that in a serious way. You had it in the slogan of Brother Biden, saving the soul of America. That was the slogan of Martin Luther King Jr.'s SCLC when they founded in 1957. We're here to save the soul of America, because Martin understood the connection between the spiritual and the social, between the existential and the economic, between the personal and the political. And of course, our feminist and womanist sisters understand that personal political connection in ways that many of us still is wrestling with. But you can't have a milquetoast, mediocre, garden variety politician deal with the most unprecedented crisis in the history of the country. You got to have a Lincoln or a Lincoln-esque, or FDR or an FDRS. But Biden was the best that the Democratic Party could do to stop Trump. That was the reason why I voted for him, But we still had to be tied to the truth and justice, that we just as human beings and as persons concerned about human suffering, we can't allow truth and justice just to get so bent because of the decay in the political system that doesn't allow truth telling and serious justice seeking. Again, a long answer to your question, though, but appreciate both of the questions. Absolutely. Appreciate both of the questions.
We so appreciate your answer, Dr. West. I want to ask, does Thomas O'Neill White, do you have a question, or Spectrum News?
Yes, I have a question. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Absolutely. Is that Brother Thomas?
It is, from W.
Brother West, thank you for being on.
We can't see your lovely face, though, brother.
Let's see. Where am I?
Oh, yeah. We like the eye-to-eye, soul-to-soul conversation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Your voice sounds good. Your voice sounds good, but it's good to be able to look in your eyes and things,
You'll have to excuse me. I'm fanboying a little bit. Just talking to you, Dr. West. I really appreciate you being on today.
Nice to be here.
You mentioned the growing like the squad and this progressive wing of the Democratic Party. How do you feel? Do you think they will be able to push Biden left? politically?
That's a good question. It's hard to say. It's very hard to say. We shall see. But that's going to be a very tough, tough situation. It really is. Because you can see the argument on both sides. I mean, you already are getting the corporate wing brothers and sisters saying that it's the left's fault. And then you got the left with the truth saying that you got one Biden Republican-like candidate. You were out there looking for unicorns. You're looking for centaurs. They were not there. And you spent all this money doing it. You didn't give the squad 1.1 billion. No. You were looking for the center, Kasich and company. So that you can put them on TV, talk about it in the green room in MSNBC and CNN, but they just weren't out there. Trump got even more Republicans. After 4 years of gangster rule, he got more Republicans. Who would have thought? I wouldn't have thought that either, not at all. And so I just don't know what kind of real pressure and power the squad plus, we can call it that way, the squad plus will actually have. It's going to be difficult. I think what's going to happen, though, is you're going to have a massive street demonstrations of folk who are part of social movements. Black Lives Matter, thank God, is not going away. You see, the Me Too movement, thank God, not going away. You see, the feminist movement concerned about Roe v. Wade with the courts not going away. So you're going to get pressure from the streets, and the pressure from the streets is much more left than even the squad oftentimes. Because even members of the squad still voted for Trump's military budget. So we got to keep that in mind. As much as I might like them and so forth, that when it comes to $724 billion, they still voted for. Ooh, wait a minute. Martin Luther King Jr. is turning over in his grave. It's militarism, racism, poverty, and materialism. Those are the four features of a decaying democracy, Brother Martin said. And I think he's absolutely right. And by racism, he meant xenophobia. We're losing sight of anybody, whoever it is. It could be Jews, it could be Arabs, it could be Black people, indigenous people, women, gays, lesbians, the elderly, physically challenged, lose sight of humanity of anybody. That's what Martin was talking about. But that has to be always linked to trying to abolish poverty, trying to account for any kind of militarism that's unnecessary. You see, the war profiteering that's unnecessary and it's lethal. And then now, of course, the possibility of the planet itself going under owing to too much indifference to ecological catastrophe. And nuclear catastrophe is still in the backdrop. I mean, you still got two gangsters with their fingers on the button, Putin and Trump, for the next 3 months. I mean, we don't talk about that too much, but those missiles, those nuclear warheads are still there. And we hope and pray that nothing happens in 3 months.
Can I ask another question?
Oh,
please?
absolutely, bro.
How high or what are your concerns that a Biden administration will abandon people of color, especially Black voters, who basically carried him to what seems to be a victory once he assumes the presidency?
Another wonderful question. No, Biden is not going to abandon people of color across the board. There's a good chance he will abandon poor and working class people of color. He's going to make his administration very colorful for the Black middle classes, symbolic representation, and then still do in Black, brown poor, white poor, Black, brown working class, you see. So that the neoliberal, colorful menagerie of highly financialized predatory capitalism, which is what we've seen in the last 40 years or so. You saw it with Clinton, you saw it with Obama and so forth, you see. that it can't deliver. That's how you end up getting a Black Lives Matter movement under a Black president, Black attorney general, and Black Homeland Security cabinet member. All that official Black power could not translate to stop these police from shooting folk down because they did not have the mechanisms of accountability in place and follow through on it. If they were as committed to doing that as they were bailing out Wall Street, we'd be in a different situation. If they were speaking to working people's needs across the board, there may not have even been a Trump. Because Trump's followers are not all racist and xenophobic. They're people also who can't stand neoliberal elites because they are hypocrites too often for them and they look down on them. They call them deplorables, they dishonor them, they degrade them and so forth. And so all of Trump's supporters are not the folk that we confronted in Charlottesville. Not at all. He's got some who are, but you got a whole lot of working class folk who said these neoliberals did not care for us. We're looking for an alternative. And the left, we didn't provide an alternative because Bernie couldn't come through and they wanted some change from a neoliberal status quo. And of course, Trump was the con man acting like he's populist and so forth. And he's got a spine. You know, gangsters do have a spine. There's no doubt about it.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much,
Yeah,
Dr. West.
I think Brother Mark's got a question.
I wanted to give Spectrum News a chance.
Oh,
if they want
Spectrum
to,
News. Yeah,
just for
absolutely.
a second. 'Cause
Absolutely.
They did let us know they were coming. Just if they have something, you have something now. Otherwise, we'll hand it over to Mark. You could unmute yourself. Go ahead, Mark. Thanks. Oops. Here, I'm sorry. Here, go ahead.
Okay. I apologize for coming in a few minutes late in case
no.
you talked about this. But do you look at this election in some ways as a united front against fascism? And do you believe, assuming, well, if Biden does not win, because we don't have an outcome yet, you know, it appears that would you think if he does win that he staved off fascism in the United States? For real?
Yeah, I think so. I do think so. Now, of course, there's always been deeply anti-democratic zones within liberal democracy, going back to the founding of the country with slavery and Jim Crow and Jane Crow, lynching, terror, and so forth. Those are crypto-fascist, anti-democratic zones within a white supremacist democracy. But democratic practices are just so fragile, even when they're up against imperial and racist and sexist background conditions. The rights and liberties are just so fragile, even when they're exclusionary to others. There's the practice of it. So there's a possibility of expanding. What fascism does is snuff out the very conditions for the possibility of democratic practices across the board. That's a qualitative leap, you see. And that's where Trump was headed. That's where Trump was headed. And that's why I spent so much of my time making, these videos and giving speeches and things, trying to convince my fellow human beings and citizens to vote for somebody who I think is mediocre, milquetoast, centrist, moderate, and a whole host of other things. And I had to tell the truth about it. But this was a prudential choice in terms of an anti-fascist coalition. In an anti-fascist coalition, you got a whole lot of foes who are part of your coalition. Political foes. I mean, I'm a Christian, so I try to love everybody. But political foes. But you have to be honest about it. Oh, God, I'm marching next to you. We both against Trump, and I appreciate, you hope your mother's doing all right and your dad is fine. But as soon as he wins, I'm coming at you tooth and nail. Because you're still not fundamentally committed to poor and working people. You're still not fundamentally committed to a struggle against white male supremacy. You're still losing sight of humanity of so many folk here and around the world. So that I do think that if Biden does win, there is two cheers for anti-fascism. Very much so. But you still got the mass incarceration regime in place. Biden was the architect of it. You still got militaristic policies AFRICOM in Africa, Middle East, Yemen. Biden was one of the cheerleaders, of course, of the invasion of Iraq. I mean, we can go on and on. The repealing of Glass-Steagall, the unleashing of Wall Street greed. Biden was bragging on that too, as were many of the neoliberal Democratic folk. Larry Summers and Tim Geithner who were around Brother Obama, you see, so that those truths, we had to respect our fellow citizens enough to really try to tell them the truth to the best of our ability. And that's very difficult to do. I think what also needs to be take place is a serious reexamination of the media, corporate media. You know how much money these pollsters made on making projections that all of us could have made drinking cognac 2 nights ago? Some of them became millionaires, you know, drinking from that cup that was overflowing, you see. And everyday people understand that too. They see it. And this is what spiritual decadence is. You know, everybody's in it for the money and status, and they'll do anything to be successful. They'll do anything to be a celebrity. Is just concerned about not getting caught. And it flattens and dumbs down the whole culture. And that is spiritual decay at its deepest level, you see. And neither one of the parties anywhere near that, you see, touching this. And Bernie was one of the few to at least highlight certain aspects of it. I mean, Bernie's not, you know, he's not a Rabbi Heschel. I mean, Bernie's not a spiritual kind of brother in that sense, but he's got such a deep sensitivity to suffering that he'll raise the issues that are connected to that. But this fascism is not a plaything. Not when your empire is in decline. Not when your military is asking for more money that you don't have. Not when your communities are shattered. Not when the pandemic is revealing a healthcare system that is just woefully inadequate to deal with the needs of people. And then when you get to the hoods and the barrios, and poor white pockets and reservations, you've seen levels of social misery that nobody really wants to come to terms with. William Barber does, and some of the others, the Poor People's Campaign. But nobody wants to deal with. But people are living it every day. You know, living it every day. But half of our fellow citizens living in or near poverty. It's
Mike, you have a question.
Yeah. I'm not quite feeling the victory lap yet. I mean, I was on the statewide committee here in New York for the Green Party, and you know, I jumped in backing Biden, you know, just like you and just like Bernie did, for the reasons you've already articulated. And he's going to probably win by 11 million votes and have a pretty blue map. But, you know, I got through the last 4 years, you know, with a very, very, very naive belief, actually succumb to hope that Trumpism would be, you know, defeated and you know, overwhelmingly renounced in this election. I was expecting I wouldn't call it a blue wave. I was hoping for an anti-fascist wave. And, you know, and now also, I don't think we're at the finish line even on this election, because, you know, Amy had a pretty scary guest on Democracy Now! This morning. If your day's not going bad enough, you can just, you know.
I've got to check that out though, Brother Mike.
Yeah.
What were they talking about?
The other part of the question is just, you know, in this difficult period, and it's still very scary, how do we move forward? And then also, if we are not crushed and we actually do see a runoff in Georgia, how do we move forward with that and be, you know, just trounce fascism and get these old racists out of the Senate, or at least disempower them? So that's my compound question.
Well, no, I tell you though, brother. I mean, I profoundly resonate with you in terms of uh, where we are provides no grounds whatsoever for any kind of substantive celebration. See, I just said it's 2 cheers for anti-fascism. See, that's all I'm talking about. You see what I mean? So this is like the blues all the way down with a little moment of Disney World for about maybe 3 minutes of Main Street Disney where we can still breathe. We don't have to worry about the fascism suffocating us. But now both the lies and the greed and the hatred and the contempt institutionalized. That's fascism right there. You see. Now that doesn't mean that all those elements are gone. The greed is still there. The hatred is there. The contempt is there. But it's not institutionalized in a neo-fascist kind of way. Now I'd have to watch this show to find out what's going on with Sister Amy, because we always learn from her so much. She's very, very crucial. She's one of the great hopes when it comes to the crisis in journalism and media in the country, because they've dumbed down in such a massive way. And I certainly don't want us to downplay the need to being fortified, deeply fortified. And see, you know, and I don't even talk about hope anymore. I mean, I don't believe for the most part in the discourse on hope. I just think we got to be a hope, period. Because the language itself gets colonized. The language itself gets commercialized so quickly, you see. And so being a hope simply means choosing to fortify ourselves and create the kind of united fronts and solidarities across race, across region, and even across national identity, national boundaries, to bear witness. And of course, there's no guarantee at all. There's no guarantee of any kind of victory. But as long as we're fighting, as long as we're organizing, as long as we're speaking the truth, seeking justice, we're keeping alive the best of the tradition of the species and the best tradition of the country and the best tradition of our families and communities and heritages, traditions and so forth. And that's the best that we can do. But it's still a very grim and a very bleak moment, very much so. It's, I mean, you look in American literature, so much American history is catching up with American literature. I mean, you got Melville's Pequod, which is similar to the Titanic, chasing the white whale. Then you got Melville's Fidele in The Confidence Man, where everything seems to be doing all right for certain folk on the boat, but it's nothing but all this snake oil manipulation, lies, mendacity, hiding criminality and crimes. And it's going to go under, but it's different than the Pequod, where it's clear the only thing left was just Ishmael on the raft, and the raft was a coffin. Now that's Melville, 1851.
Right.
He already saw it. That's that greed of predatory capitalism, that hatred of white supremacy, obsession of whiteness and the whiteness of the well. Melville saw it. He's an upstate New York brother.
Right.
He's like Rick James. He's already wrestling with the funk. Upstate New York. And that means truth tellers and justice seekers can come from anywhere, right? Mississippi, upstate New York, right. Brooklyn, I mean, California, whatever it is. And that's good news. That's good news. But we haven't reached the point now where the election is fully over. We still might see, some street activity. We don't know what Trump's going to do in terms of trying to continually undermine the legitimacy of the election. But my hunch is that with these votes coming in, a Biden win is going to be difficult to completely undo. That's my hypothesis at the moment. But I could be wrong.
And what about the Georgia runoffs?
With Raphael and company?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
runoff for the Senate seats.
No, I think we're going to have to fight. We're going to have to fight. Very much so. I think there's a chance. There's a chance that Raphael could win. If he and I were just together at the funeral for James Cone, you know, great theologian, the founder of Black liberation theology.
Right.
We both spoke at that funeral. He wrote his dissertation under James Cone at Union Theological Seminary. It's fascinating to see him jump all the way from pastor to the senatorial candidate, and he's got a good chance, very good chance. Because if they spend as much money supporting him as they did looking for that Biden Republican,
Mm-hmm.
The money, the issue on money.
we'd be in a different situation, you know. But you know, one of the bottom lines too here is the role of Black people. And by Black people, I don't mean every Black person in the country, because we are as heterogeneous and diverse and various as anybody else. But you know, if you live in a country where your white majority will continually vote for Trump, and without the Black vote pushing over a Biden, you would slide down the slope of fascism.
Right.
That lets you know that historically the Black freedom movement has been the leaven in the American democratic loaf.
Mm-hmm.
It has been the yeast
Tell it.
in the very soul of America. Not because Black people are born virtuous, tied to truth and justice, but because enough Black people, because we got our Black thugs and gangsters and sellouts like any other community, but enough Black people choose integrity, choose generosity, choose a commitment to democracy. And that puts a smile on Harriet Tubman's face and Frederick Douglass's face and Martin King's face and Fannie Lou Hamer's face. That means they didn't struggle for nothing. They didn't sacrifice in vain. And they were always open to solidarity. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about on Monday, because see, the Democratic Party is so obsessed with identity. Identity doesn't mean nothing if it's not grounded in integrity and solidarity with public policy that highlights the least of these. From the 25th chapter of Matthew, when that Palestinian Jew named Jesus said, "What you do unto me, you do to the poor, the orphan, the widow." And he was doing nothing but building on the genius of Hebrew scripture. To be human is to spread hesed, steadfast love, loving kindness to the orphan, the widow, the fatherless, the motherless, the poor, the persecuted, the subjugated. And that's one of the great gifts to the whole world of our Jewish brothers and sisters. Now, of course, they themselves have to deal with the critique too. In their communities, in their nations,
Yes.
in their synagogues. But it is a standard that is for the world. And every portion of the species, this is one of the great moral revolutions in the species, every portion of the species that wants the claim of any kind of moral and spiritual greatness has to deal with the question, what are you doing for the orphans, the widows, the fatherless, the motherless, the poor, the persecuted, the subjugated, the dishonored, the degraded? And that is the kind of universalism that we have to have when you talk about identity. So you're talking about racial identity, ethnic identity, gender identity, sexual orientation identity. Those are real, but the question is, what kind of integrity is this pillar? What kind of solidarity? What kind of public policy? And if you don't raise those questions, you can end up, celebrating the Clarence Thomas on the one hand because he's beautifully Black, but sides with the powerful and the wealthy.
Right.
Or Sister Amy, she's a woman, siding with the powerful and the wealthy. Or any other group that we can come up with. Some of our Jewish right-wing folk, right? Their Jewish identity sways away from focusing on the orphan and the widow and the poor and the subjugated. Same is true with our Arabs, same is true with our Muslims, and so forth and so on, you see. That's the moral and spiritual standards that we must forever highlight, even in a moment when it looks like it's got the chance of a snowball in hell.
So, Dr. West, you are so generous with your time and so.
Oh, what time is? Oh, no, these. Oh, Lord, I didn't
And
realize.
I wanted to let in our board members who are here. So Marie Schuster is our board chair.
That's wonderful. Where's Sister Marie?
She's down here.
Hey, how you doing there?
Hello.
And
Chris, I see
Chris,
Brother Chris with his brim on still.
yeah,
Looking sharp. He looking sharp.
social worker, doctor of social work at UB.
Lord, he's a
Marty
doctor. He's a
McGee.
doctor.
Marty
This
McGee.
is Brother Marty. How you doing there, man?
Hey, Brother West, thank you so much.
On the
Good
dinner
to see you.
committee.
Good to see you. I like that around your neck, though. You doing? Oh no, that's just your mask under. Oh yeah, I
Mask,
see.
his mask, yeah.
No, you a good citizen, man. You a good citizen, brother.
I just wanted to give them a chance because, so we have so maybe if any of you have a question you want to ask, and
absolutely
the media, you can still, of course, be here for this part. We just wanted to give them a little chance to.
You also blessed to work with Sister Vicky, though. Boy, she's really something, though, isn't she?
Oh,
Absolutely.
I'm overwhelmed with you. And
no, it's true.
And
but your spirit. I've been talking about this spirit. I've been talking about these moral standards. And you got folk like that. I mean, that makes a difference. That makes a big difference in the world. But I know you all have some questions from the board here.
I've got one.
Sure.
I'm the co-chair of the Resist Militarism Task Force at the Peace Center. So I'm just really grateful that you speak to militarism so much. And as you've already said, Biden isn't going to address this issue. Even the more progressive side of the Democratic Party is supporting like the insane Pentagon budget at this point. But I've seen, the militarism, it doesn't trickle down, it pours onto our communities. And I'm hopeful that the movements in the streets for Black Lives Matter, to defund the police, that kind of rises up to the level of consciousness that we need to defund the Pentagon. And I'm just wondering how you see that. My concern is there's such a reverence and respect for servicemen and women that the military seems to be an untouchable thing. And when you say defund the Pentagon, people are very sensitive to that. And I wonder if there's a good way to merge those ideas, because I see them as the same struggle.
Oh, you are absolutely right. And many of us were trying to make that connection between police power, Wall Street power, and Pentagon power. And the police crimes and the Wall Street crimes and the Pentagon crimes, all of them unaccountable. All of them unaccountable, you see. And so the question becomes, how then do we talk about militarism while not losing sight of the humanity of the soldiers themselves? And this is true in each case. We can hate Wall Street greed and still know that human beings on Wall Street. Right? We hate police brutality and police murder, but the police are still human beings like we are. You see? And that's where the moral and the spiritual issues come in. How do you hate the sin and still try to keep track of the humanity of the sinner? I learned that in Sunday school, and that's very important. Very important. Or you just end up with this Manichaean view of the world. It's just us and it's just them, and everything comes down to power. No, it's not just power. That morality and spirituality and political solidarity, those are forms of power too. It's just not economic power. It's just not military power. So that we've got to be unflinching in our critique of militarism and say that we're talking about cutting back massively for military spending, and at the same time concerned about the human beings who are in the military in terms of what kind of alternatives they'd have or what kind of other options they would have. And for the most part, you're talking about the equipment. I mean, you're spending primarily just these huge instrumentalities they're spending money on. Instrumentalities of massive violence that they're spending money on, you see. And Black Lives Matter has a number of figures and spokespersons who make this connection, but it's not made as much in the media. I mean, Brother Anderson's been so kind to me, so he's allowed me to run my mouth on television in front of my fellow citizens a lot in corporate media. And that's a very difficult thing to raise these kind of issues in corporate media because they're taboo issues in corporate media for the most part. And I mean, you'd have to go to when Brother was talking about the Green Party with Brother Howie and Sister Angela. They were the only candidates raising these kind of issues explicitly at the presidential level, but had difficulty getting access to the media. That's why we had them on our Tightrope podcast, just to make sure that their voices were out there. I believe in lift every voice, even if I'm not strategically agreeing with them at the moment. What they were saying was truthful. It had to be accented. But you know, we part of this has to do with the Obama effect, and Democratic Party has yet to come to terms with this. You see, somebody who drops over 20,000 bombs every year, and yet is viewed as a man of peace. The Nobel Prize gives him the Peace Prize. You see, somebody who can assassinate an American citizen with no due process, and not one major liberal critic steps forward.
Mhm.
You got to say, look, we love Obama. He's brilliant. His wife was even more beautiful and magnificent, but the brother's wrong his two left shoes. You don't assassinate your fellow citizens because you have political disagreements without, let alone without due process. And that's just the peak of it. You see what I mean?
Mhm.
You don't drop drones on innocent people and then lie about it. You don't expand militarism. You don't drop bombs in so-called regular wars and cast yourself as a man of peace. You just don't. I mean, Churchill had more honesty than that. No, drop the bombs. We gonna win. Well, at least he's honest about it. And the impact on Black America was even more intense. Historically, Black people have always been more anti-war than most groups. Under Obama, we became more pro-war. So that's what happens when you move from bearing the cross to waving the flag. And that flag can hide and conceal a whole lot of evil. And if that cross signifies that unarmed truth, unconditional love, concerned about the least of these. So you don't have to be a Christian to accept what the meaning of that is. You see. And Black folk had a shift following symbolic Black leadership. We didn't have enough voices to bring critique to bear on the brother. Some of us were out there. We got, trashed and demonized and things, but that, that's all right. That's all right, because you're not in it for a popularity game at all. But there's an Obama effect, and in a way, Biden is an extension of the Obama effect too. Nobody could be critical of Biden for the most part in the Black community because he was there 8 years with Obama. He said, well, what does that mean? Wait a minute. We talk about suffering in the community. We talking about jails. We talking about schools. We talking about healthcare. We're not talking about some kind of identity narrow coming together because of a breakthrough. It is an important breakthrough. We don't downplay that, but that breakthrough doesn't blind us to the suffering that's out there. It doesn't put us to sleep and pacify us in regard to militarism. And so we thank God for Black Agenda Report and Counterpunch and Black Alliance for Peace and work that you all do. John Mubarak and others, they were raising these issues, but they couldn't get any traction for the most part. But it's coming back. You can't live a lie forever. No lie lives forever. It just doesn't. In our personal lives, in our collective lives, sooner or later, you're going to have to come to terms with reality. You cannot not know. You can't escape it. Militarism is a crucial one. It's a crucial one. Let me ask you all a question. Why is it that upstate New York seems to be such a site of crucial anti-militaristic activity as opposed to so many other regions of the country that seem to be much more asleep than you all are? What is it about upstate New York? I've always noticed that.
History, going right back to the abolitionist movement.
Yeah.
Suffrage movement.
Yeah.
Was declared in the middle of Trump country. He's teaching, the governor's teaching those people their history.
Right.
Equal rights heritage zone, and is invested in building museums and restoring things. It's, there's a long history here. There's also the burnt over district, central and western New York.
Mm-hmm.
Many experimental utopian communities. And we have and we can see we see the beast too, because you have a very red, very lowly populated, expanse of lots and lots of Trump signs. Interestingly, many of the same farms that are flying Trump signs started out flying Bernie signs early on. Right?
That's
And
absolutely.
you've got this, you've got this New York redneck, New York conservative populate, which is different than you see out west.
Right.
And
Right.
they're surrounded by, they're speckled with centers of activism like, Syracuse, Ithaca, Rochester, so that we've got the conflict and we've got the history, and, in these progressive communities, we've got the, the intellectual and human resources. So there's always going to be a political debate here.
Mm-hmm.
When we're blue islands in the sea of red, if you want to use that,
It makes a lot of sense, though, brother. Makes a lot of sense. No, I appreciate that, though. I appreciate
get you back here in person next year.
Yeah,
that's what we're hoping for.
We're gonna work. We're gonna work. We got to just put together a really
They'll
great.
show you a good time. You have to see Niagara Falls.
Yeah, I don't know. I got to keep a little distance from Niagara Falls.
Musicians Club.
Oh, that's too seductive, though.
Oh yeah, no,
That's,
come on.
that's a sense of the sublime there. Good God Almighty.
Dr. West.
Yes.
Chris?
In the same way that Barack's presidency, generated a backlash and all this white hatred, I mean, don't you think Kamala's vice presidency is going to do the same this time around as well?
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be part of it. Absolutely, especially given the fact that Brother Biden, as he gets older, people think that he might not be around that long, and therefore there's a possibility of her moving directly into the presidency, which would generate, you got a black sister as president. Good God Almighty. Whew, you better get your ways of security, you know what I mean? Very much so. But the irony is, again, is that given all the brilliance and beauty of Sister Kamala, she is a fundamental figure of that same neoliberal hegemony. Mm-hmm. So you would think that she was Ella Baker, come back from the dead, and you say, no, y'all, no, she's Kamala now. Right. She's not Ella Baker. Don't get it confused. Don't get it confused. You know what I mean? Aretha Franklin is not Jodie Watley. Don't get it confused. But the perception, especially the right wing, they just homogenize all of that. That's why Biden got called a socialist. They call Kamala a communist. Now, her father was a Marxist. I know him. He's a professor at Stanford. He's still a Marxist economist. He is what we call a Marxist communist. That's his father, not his daughter.
Right.
His daughter is a neoliberal. Her record shows, her affiliation shows. So you're absolutely right. A lot of this backlash doesn't have to do with truth. It has to do with perception.
Exactly.
And the white supremacy that you're talking about, I mean, it just cuts so deep in the country, and we have to be honest and candid about that. And therefore, Barack Obama, Kamala, I mean, they had Brother Cory Booker attacked like he was Malcolm X or something. Please spare me. We were born that night, but not last night. Come on. But that's part of the misperception and the misinformation and the lying machine that you get among the money classes of Fox News and the others. You see that they would say almost anything.
Right.
They'll say almost anything.
Absolutely.
Definitely. It's but there's no doubt that that all of our movements on the left, we just had a wonderful gathering with Nick Branner, the People's Party, with Nina Turner and
right.
Mariam Williamson and others. and on the move. But we've got to be able to break the neoliberal hegemony of Black leadership to get to Black people. It's a very difficult thing to do, but it's got to be done. It's got to be done. So the issues of militarism, the issues of corporate power, the issues of foreign policy, as well as what the Black Lives Matter movement is concerned about. That's a difficult thing. You see, you think about with Brother Bernie, that we have never had the most progressive presidential candidate of a major party. Eugene Debs and Norman Thomas, we don't want to downplay, but they were not major parties. Of a major party and the most progressive bloc, voting bloc, who were Black people, who didn't go for the most progressive candidate. Never had that. If we had been successful in convincing the most progressive voting bloc Black people to go with Bernie, it would have been a different situation in the Democratic Party. You see. That is one of the effects of neoliberal Black leadership, which is myopic, which is tied to Wall Street, tied to militarism, the Pentagon, and it simply doesn't have enough spine. And we have to hit that head on. And that's a difficult thing to do. Difficult thing to do, because Black people, we are just so desperate. What is it? Over 55% of Black people have no wealth whatsoever. Nothing at all. 1% of folk in the Black community have 70% of the wealth. Just like 1% in the whole country have disproportionate amount of wealth. And so the Black masses are supposed to live their lives vicariously through the Black 1%. Oh, they're doing so well. Oh, they're so successful. Oh, they got the first Black this, they got the first Black that, and they broke us the 10 Commandments financially. Now, see, that is sick. That's pathological. But that's what neoliberal attitudes and leadership does. That's why Clyburn sit there and say that under no conditions will there be Medicare for all. He receives millions of dollars from big pharmaceutical companies. But yet he says he's in the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. Quit lying, Clyburn. Now, he rightly is concerned about racism, but it's couched in such a way, you don't think Medicare for all is a move against racism? If poor Black people can gain assets and you won't allow it because of the big money coming your way, and you become the catalyst behind Biden, and Biden says, what? I'll veto the bill, even if they pass it. Oh my God. This is where we are. So this issue of Obama is really not simply in any way about his person, God bless him and be with him, but it's about who he signifies, what forces he reinforces, which is these deeply centrist, moderate, neoliberal, Wall Street embracing, pro-militaristic policies in the name of Black leadership and Black people and the Black community. That's what we're wrestling with. That's what we're wrestling with.
Yep, such a lot of work to do. Such a lot of work to do. As you speak, I just keep thinking it's the unarmed truth and unconditional love. It's that moral integrity, as you say, the moral integrity and the universal solidarity that we need, that's going to move people and move massive numbers of people. That learning, that re-educating, that reimagining, and believing that another world is possible.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And your generosity of spirit. And actually, I can't help thinking, I know you had a busy day today. And, I don't know how much time you have. I'm sure I hope you have a clock nearby, so it's not.
Yeah, no. We're in good shape. I've got about 6 or 7 of these things today, but this is an important one. This is a very, very important
well,
one.
You are such an inspiration, my dear brother, our dear brother. You
you
really.
all inspired me and us. I'm telling you.
So what would you say, I'd like to ask a question, especially for directing the work of the Western New York Peace Center. What, I say one of the things that we really focus on is unite the struggles, unite the visions, is that one love, is that truth and love, principles in the spirit. So in a more sort of tangible way, what would you say are some of the things that you think we need to focus on the most?
I think the connection between the militarism on the domestic front with the police department and the militarism on the militarism abroad. You know what I mean? The ways in which they are connected, continuous in that way.
Well, actually, when that happened with Martin, that was just a perfect example of the militarization of the police and just how wrong-headed, just how crazy it is. It's just, yeah.
Absolutely. Very important. And you remember, the pressure that he got from Newhouse and Rabbi Heschel and William Coffin, Stokely Carmichael, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Coretta. Coretta was there before Martin was when it came to critique of Vietnam.
Really?
That one of the most crucial moments was Martin had met a young brother in Mississippi who had told Martin he had no patience whatsoever for a nonviolent struggle. And Martin continually would go down and see him and talk with him. And finally, he convinced the brother to join the nonviolent movement. And then within 6 months, that same brother was sent to Vietnam. And he was killed within months. And Martin went back and asked where he was. And they said, he got killed. He got killed what? In Vietnam. Mm. So you taught this brother about nonviolence in Mississippi, but you hadn't said a word about Vietnam. That's where he got crushed. Mm. That hit him so hard. And it's true. It's a contradiction. Then when he saw the babies in the Rampart magazine, when he was writing the book in Jamaica, and said, my God, those babies have the same value as black, white, red babies in America. He's a Christian. He's a Christian in a serious way. So that he knew that he had to break his silence. And that's exactly what you all do. You make that connection. You make it at a human level, at a humane level, at a moral level, And for some of us who are religious, at a spiritual level. You know what I mean? And then you hold on, because see, what you all exemplify is what I've been talking about, which is all of you all have your own different identities, different colors and religions and secular identities and musical identities. I know all y'all don't like the same music, I'm sure, but those identities end up allowing you all to put a premium on integrity, solidarity, peace, justice. That's bigger than all of us. There is no human identity that fully exemplifies truth, justice, peace, and democracy. All of us are under judgment to those. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's to have organizations like that, let you know that that the worst hasn't completely taken over in a moment of such spiritual decadence and moral decrepitude. And that's empowering to each other. That's deeply empowering to each other. But we all have our different ways of doing it. Some of them are Muslim, some are Buddhist, some are Hindu, some are Sufi, some are Judaic, some are atheistic, some are agnostic. Let's march together. Let's work together. Let's struggle together. Let's fight together. Boom.
Boom.
Boom, boom, boom. That's
boom. Some of us are all the above.
Then you turn on a little Rick James, let him take you to a different place. Because see, the art always authorizes an alternative reality. It takes us somewhere else. This is very important. Sun Ra used to begin all of his concerts saying, well, Black people have tried everything possible. It's time for us to try the impossible. I was on Mars yesterday. Come with me. I want to take you to Mars for 2 hours. Okay, Sunro, let's go.
Yes.
Let's go. George Clinton, let's go on the mothership. Okay, George. Okay, Bootsy, let's go on the mothership. Here come the Commodores. Lionel Richie say, zoom,
Wow.
zoom,
I was gonna
zoom.
say,
I would like to take you away. Come with me.
on a Love Supreme.
Oh Lord, you ain't lying. Coltrane, shoot. Coltrane take you to heaven 2 times. You didn't even know you were there.
Yes, yes.
Didn't even know you were there. Absolutely. But
Now,
art does that in general. Carole King did that with Aretha, with Natural Woman. Together, they authorize an alternative reality. You know what I mean? This is what artists do. It's a beautiful thing. And this is why the arts are so very important, especially for young people, because most of them are not tied to churches and synagogues and temples. So music becomes their dominant form of transcendence, to objectify their grief, to get some difference from the suffering, some distance from the suffering, so they can re-engage it. And it's very difficult to get enough quality music in the oligarchic run recording industry these days.
Yes, it is.
The genius and the talent still there among the young folk, but it's hard for it. So J. Cole's and others, they got to be on the sides of Erykah Badu and the others that be on the side. It's hard for them to really gain the high level of visibility that they really want. And so you don't have Rick James. I mean, Brother Chris can correct me. So you ain't got nobody right now out there with the genius of a Rick James. Is that right, Chris?
I think they keep calling Kanye a genius.
Oh no, Kanye is a genius. He just confused and mixed up. And things.
Yeah.
Definitely.
He a genius, but he ain't no Rick James though.
He ain't exactly. He
What
ain't
about communal? What about communal music? What about communal music though? Isn't that an important thing? Isn't that healthy community will make music together?
Because see, what Rick James could do, he could take you almost to what James Brown could take you. Then he could the next day he sing a solo with Smokey Robinson.
Right.
And then the next day he sang one with the Portuguese sister. What was her name? Lady y'all know who I'm talking about. The white sister who we used to sing with all the time. Marie.
Tina Marie.
Tina. That's right. Tina Marie.
Right.
Then he write a slow song for the Temptations.
Mm-hmm.
So he got silky soul, he got a gentleness, he got funk,
and he got fire.
And he got sacred fire out of the chocolate side of Buffalo. That's exactly right. And it ain't no Rick James without Dyke and the Blazers coming out of Buffalo, funky Broadway.
Coming out of
soul,
Buffalo.
all of that.
When you come here, we'll take you to the Forest Lawn, to the Rick James spot in Forest Lawn.
Is that where he's buried?
That's where he's buried. Yes. No, you're coming you are, aren't you coming?
No, I'm gonna try to get there. Oh no, I'll definitely try to get there. I'm gonna definitely try to get there.
We got to invite him in the summertime.
Yeah. We'll invite you.
Oh no, you ain't lying.
Okay, well, special time in the summertime.
That's right.
Lord have mercy.
I want to give Deidre a chance too. Deidre, do you have a question?
Every time I had a question, it was already answered. Just on the same, it was already, I had a question about spirit, the connection with spirituality and suffering and oppression. You already answered that. I had a question about the artist and I was just talking to my son about, he's an artist, and about, you mentioned Rick James, but I was talking to him about Tina Turner and how her music transcended genres. She was sung with an orchestra to singing, with rock and roll. But, I always talk to him about the message. I said, it's good to get into music, but what is going to be your message? What's your message? And he's 14 years old. I know he's trying to figure out what that is. But I know this is probably a typical question for you all the time, but But basically, how do we get young people, that 13, 12, 14, you know, connected politically, socially, spiritually, so that they know that they have a voice now, and you know, and they know what can they do now, and how do they make their voice known now? As
Oh, that's a wonderful, wonderful question. Well, one is, I mean, I hope I get a chance to talk to him. I said, you got a jump start in life just having you as his mama.
Yes, yes, it is.
Thank you.
Oh, that
He
makes a
is.
difference.
Oh, yes, he
That
is.
makes a difference. I've taught in prisons for 37 years. And first
Wow.
question I always raise to brothers, how many of y'all take a bullet for your mama?
Mm.
And they all raise their hand. I said, I got the right crowd. I'm in the right crowd now. You tied to something bigger than you. You tied to
Yes.
something big in your ego and your narcissism and hedonism.
Bigger than you.
You know what it means to be to love and to serve. And he's got you in that sense when that is back. But he's got the culture coming at him, and he's got a very, very decadent culture coming at him. So they're trying to convince him to be an echo rather than a voice.
Yes.
Just being an extension of a chamber. Just be an extension of a certain kind of constituency, because that's the stereotype. Everybody's like that, and you're gonna be another one. No, you tell him, don't be a copy, be an original.
All right.
You know what I mean?
That's what his father tells him all the time. Yes.
That's the see. He got mom and dad already. I know. I'm catching up with y'all. I'm trying to catch up with y'all when it comes to the wisdom. But no, don't be no copy. You're an original, just like your finger.
Original.
That's what your voice is. And you come from a people whose anthem is lift every, not echo.
Yes.
Every voice.
Yes.
And all the figures we talking about. And no matter what color it is, it could be a Stephen Sondheim finding his voice over against Oscar Hammerstein II, his surrogate father. You got to find your voice.
That's right.
You build on those who came before. You know, James Brown was trying to be Little Richard. Can you imagine what James Brown would have been like if he imitated Little Richard all his life? But he was a young brother and he saw the stars.
Right.
You know? Now, Bootsy and I just co-wrote a song this summer called Stars. Stars have no name, they just shine. So the Little Richard had to tell James, you got to shine, man. You don't have to be like me.
That's right.
See, you tell your son, saying to Marion Williams said that to Aretha Franklin. I want to be the next Marion Williams. No, you don't, Aretha. No, you're going to be Aretha. There's going to be some Marion in you. There's going to be some James Cleveland in you. There's going to be some Sam Cooke in you. Some Otis in you. You're going to take Otis Redding's song, Respect, and make it your own. Everybody forgot he wrote the song. Because she's Aretha. She found her voice. That's what our young folk need to hear over and over again. But the culture's telling them to be copies. Because that's the road to success. No, be original. That's the road to greatness.
Yes.
That's the road to greatness, artistic greatness, spiritual greatness, moral greatness, personal greatness. And that's a whole different thing. Now, the hard lesson, of course, and I have to bring this to a close, y'all, is that there's such a cost to that kind of quest for truth, goodness, beauty in its greatest form. And that's difficult. It's not really about comfort and convenience. It's wrestling with discontent inside of your own soul, inside of your community, confronting suffering. You know, Beethoven used to say, I get up every morning and try to look unflinchingly at the evil in the world and muster the courage to still do something, or create something beautiful. You see, that's what greatness is about. And here's a cat who's deaf and writing some of the most beautiful music we've ever heard. You see, you can imagine Stevie Wonder the same way. I might not be able to physically see, but I can see some things you don't see. Listen to this. Joy's Songs in the Key of Life. You see, that's what you folk need to be exposed to. And it could be in the moral form, coming out of different religious and secular traditions. It could be in the political form of movements that have that kind of spiritual dimension, even as they engage structures of domination. It could be in personal friendships and fellowships and brotherhoods and sisterhoods within various networks, All of those forms of greatness are available to us. But the culture, weapons of mass distraction. They don't want folk to gain access to that kind of greatness. No. Because once you catch that kind of fire, you end up with organizations like you all, every community. And you get organizations like you all in every community. Then we really got some reason to celebrate.
We're working on it.
We go get some fundamental social change in that way, but we just don't know because, I mean, Emma Goldman used to say, if you could fundamentally change society by voting, the elites would make voting illegal. Because the interests are so entrenched that even the things we thought were normal will be suspended.
I gotta steal that one, bro. I'm stealing that one.
That's Emma.
I gotta steal that one.
That's Sister Emma. That's Emma Goldman.
That is true. You ain't gonna get no real change through voting. You ain't gonna change the master house with the master rule.
No, but voting is one form of weaponry.
Right.
Yeah.
Necessary, but
Jazz
not
like. You
sufficient,
got to be
right?
jazz like. You see, jazz, you got to be flexible enough to say, I got to use all my forms of weaponry, no matter what. So
That's
voting is one, but if you fetishize voting and ascribe magical powers to it,
Right.
then you lying to the people.
Right.
That's right.
Then you headed to a dead end. And Emma's just reminding us. Now, she's right now from jail. So, I mean, you know, she got her perspective because she put in jail in the name of social order under the Espionage Act in the 1910s. With Jane Addams and the others standing up against the war. Jane Addams was viewed as the most dangerous person in America in 1919 because she's standing up against the war. Get a Nobel Prize just 12 years later. She held on. And Jane Addams was no revolutionary, but when you stood up against the war, you go into jail. Eugene Debs goes to jail. I mean, a whole host of those folk are thrown in jail as a result of their standing up against the war. That's World War I. World War I, they're firing professors at Columbia and Princeton and Harvard and Berkeley and University of Chicago and so forth because they come out against the war and they don't conform and they're supposed to be academically objective and neutral and all the other lies that they telling folk. No, these folk bearing witness. So Emma's part of that generation. You see what I mean? She's part of that generation. She's one of the reasons why Angela joined the Communist Party, Emma Goldman.
Well, I was going to say, when you come out, we'll get some dancing in there too.
Good God, y'all got me spending 2 or 3 days in upstate New York.
Oh yeah, we're ready. We're ready. We'll get you to all the
I'm gonna have to run.
students.
I got to run. Appreciate
Of
you
course
all.
you do.
But see y'all Monday.
We're so grateful.
I
Thank
salute
you.
each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Salute each
Dr.
and
West.
every one of you.
Thank
They're
you.
Take
strong.
care.
They're
Thank
strong
you.
though. Definitely.
Thank you, brother.
All the best to you.
Oh, indeed. And God bless your families. Stay safe
God bless.
and strong.
Big hugs and love.
Definitely.
See you then. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for the delay in getting you in, but anyway, what a
Thanks.
charge. Well, I hope you'll join us on Monday. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
That'll keep us flying all weekend long.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Marty. Spectrum News, are you still there? You could have asked a question. We did try to give you a chance. Anyway, thank you for coming. Thank you, Marty, for coming.
Okay, I'll see you later.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Thank you, Spectrum News. Thank you, Marty. And we'll actually, so Spectrum, are you still there? Well,
Yes.
I guess we'll close this out. Okay, thank you
Okay.
all. We're closing the meeting. Thank you, Spectrum. And Marie did say she needed to go back into work. And yeah, she's looking forward to Monday, as are we all. Okay, thank you, Spectrum News. Thanks,
Okay.
Deidre.
See you
Bye
later.
for now.
Thanks. Bye.